Like I said, I like to call myself a recovering sysadmin, and you can tell by my shirt, it says pen tester, but it's crossed out and it says guest sysadmin. You might not be able to see all of it.
It's something super important to exist in any company. And yeah, people who want to just the first time hear about Active Directory, they're going to be like, it's what?
Set a password, then I can potentially get access to a domain account or a domain admin account or other administrators just by resetting their password. So there's a lot of insecure permissions, insecure delegations that I see.
You know what? Like sometimes it's even about some basic things, like some vulnerable protocols, enable it. I want to ensure that my server is just like compliant, respecting all the rules. And we know we have to keep an eye about the versions.
Password, then you can take offline and you can do something called cracking. So you can take that hash, you can try and crack it. Cracking it will potentially revert it to its plain text password.
Welcome everyone in a new episode in the Cyber Corner podcast, and a new episode with a special guest with us. I want to welcome with me here a hacker and a senior pen tester. Welcome, Spencer. I want to thank you so much for your valuable time, and I'll leave the word for you to introduce more yourself for the audience. And I'm sure they're going to enjoy that because you have an amazing background when we're talking about the offensive security. I've been checking your LinkedIn account. You're doing great stuff. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And again, appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and everybody who's listening. So I like to call myself or refer to myself as a recovering sysadmin. I spent a lot of time, probably like 10 years plus, doing IT systems administration, administering and securing Active Directory, internal networks, servers, VMware, backups, DR, all that jazz, a typical IT admin, a typical sysadmin. So I spent many years doing that. And I had played with computers my whole life. So I was very familiar with computers and technology growing up. Fast forward to today, I left that role doing IT and security. And now I do offensive security. And primarily what I focus on is the topic of today's conversation, which is internal networks, Active Directory. That's kind of my happy place, my specialty or my area of focus. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I like most. So I spend most of my time now doing security engagements for a company called Secure IT 360. That's the company I work for. We're a full service cybersecurity consulting company. We do offensive security. We do ISO, like audits, compliance, and assessments. We do digital forensics and response. We have a managed SOC internally. So most of my time is spent doing internal pen tests, assume breach, Active Directory security assessments, and looking at things like that. So that's a little bit about me. Like I said, I like to call myself a recovering sysadmin, and you can tell by my shirt, it says pen tester, but it's crossed out and it says guest sysadmin. You might not be able to see all of it. This is one of the shirts that I made, but I really do think of myself that way because most of what I do, most of the content that I make through my security assessments, I'm trying to help sysadmins. I'm trying to help my former self, really. I'm trying to give advice to my former self on how to secure an internal network, how to secure Active Directory. So that's what I spend a lot of my time on now.
Exactly, and that's why all this amazing background meets our topic today when we're going to talk about the Active Directory. When we talk about the Active Directory, we are talking about an essential component in the infrastructure, right? It's something super important to exist in any company. And yeah, people who want to just the first time hear about Active Directory, they're going to be like, it's what?
Yeah.
We need to do more about it. And we always say that, it's not enough just to have an Active Directory, but it's also you have to secure it, right? Because by default, it contains a lot of vulnerabilities. It contains a lot of misconfigurations. So we have that amazing topic with someone who is super experienced in that. So yeah, the first question is so classical one for many students, and they always just ask it when the first time, they hear the word Active Directory. So what is it? What is an Active Directory and why it's so, a critical component and it's so crucial for any company?
Yeah. Yeah, Active Directory is a hacker's playground. And I say that in jest, but so Active Directory is a directory service. So it was developed by Microsoft, and it's for Windows domain networks, right? So Active Directory is a directory service. It contains groups and users and computers and servers. There's a whole bunch of different objects that are within Active Directory. There's a lot of different components to Active Directory. I have to cover all of it, but it essentially serves as a centralized platform for managing users, computers, and devices and resources within a network. You can also secure those devices. That's what you mentioned is a big part of that, is securing those resources, those Active Directory objects. But it also provides, Active Directory provides for authentication and authorization as well. So Active Directory has permissions, just like a lot of things that you might be familiar with, but it also can authorize users to access certain things as well. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to Active Directory. And one of the things that I like to tell people, or like to say, is Active Directory is an administration tool. It's not a security tool. And what I mean by that is, unfortunately, there's not a lot of warnings or messages or dialog boxes that pop up and say, hey, you might be misconfiguring this, or hey, do you really want to put everyone in the domain admins group? There's not really a lot of warnings or security alerts built into it when you're administrating it. So that's part of what makes it difficult, because you have to know what you're doing. And many people, including myself, don't know it at that depth, at that level, to really understand, like, what are the impacts of this? What's going to happen? Is this misconfigured? Is this how it should be? Is this default thing safe, or should I change it? So there's a lot of nuance to it. It's very complex. And I definitely empathize with people who are just learning it, because I still am learning it to this day.
Yeah, sure. We know that it's something really dynamic. Microsoft, they're releasing, new versions, each period. And absolutely, we have to learn about it. And even we have to know more about its security. Because right now, I just wanted to put an Active Directory in my company, right? It's not enough just to configure it and go. So here, we're going to talk about the vulnerabilities. Now, if someone just decided like this, right now, I just decided to put that Active Directory, and I just go, it's functional, it works. But we know that, by default, it exists a lot of vulnerabilities. So the question comes right now, what are the most common vulnerabilities associated with Active Directory? What are, the biggest one?
Yeah, so what I see on internal pen tests, on assumed breach engagements, Active Directory assessments, a lot of the common vulnerabilities or misconfigurations come down to credentials and passwords. So a lot of times I see just weak passwords, right? So, weak password policies, allowing 8 characters, not enforcing any complexity requirements, things like that. That allows for users to create weak passwords, like password 123, or the season, year kind of things that you might have seen. So weak passwords is definitely one, right? And you can configure that and harden that with stronger password policies. Another one that I see all the time is just unsecured credential files, or unsecured credentials, I like to call them. Those can be in a number of different places, most commonly in file shares. Susie in accounting can't remember all of her passwords, so she puts it in password.doc, right, on the file share. So that's a very common one as well, kind of around credentials. Something that has to do more with Active Directory, the infrastructure itself, are misconfigured permissions. So, or delegations. So delegations are permissions that you can assign to users or resources within Active Directory without putting them in a group. So rather than put a user in the help desk group, I can just delegate them the permission to say reset passwords. So what happens a lot of times is IT admins, kind of not knowing all the intricacies of it, will say give everyone the ability to reset everybody else's passwords. So if I can reset a password, then I can potentially get access to a domain account or a domain admin account or other administrators just by resetting their password. So there's a lot of insecure permissions, insecure delegations that I see. The last one that I've seen that's super recently common are misconfigurations to certificate templates. So certificates, ADCS is AD or Active Directory Certificate Services. That's like PKI, so public key infrastructure internally. So you can create certificates, you can configure SSL and put a cert on it on a website, and a whole bunch of stuff. Those templates oftentimes are misconfigured. And many times that's not the fault of the IT person. Many times it's the vendor that says, hey, you need to deploy this certificate template and it needs these permissions, or the appliance or the software will just deploy that automatically. You just give it permissions and it'll create everything for you, and it misconfigures it. So ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, is another area where I see common misconfigurations.
Exactly, and you know what? Like sometimes it's even about some basic things, like some vulnerable protocols, enable it. Talking about, for example, the NMNR NAT BIOS vulnerability, and this is one of the attacks, which really is so simple to make it, but its impact it's really so bad, and even I can say it lead to privilege escalation.
Real quick with LMNR. That's something that, is a precursor to DNS. So if you have working and functional DNS in your environment, you really don't need LMNR or NBNS. And those, fortunately, at least for me, like on my internals, I've seen that more restricted as of late. So more organizations are kind of getting with the idea there that can be a vulnerable or lead to an attack path. So they're restricting it, disabling LMNR, which is great to see.
Yeah, totally. And even, when it comes to best practice, you have to just disable them, like it's something that's so old. So, but right now the question comes like, how can organization prevent privilege escalation attack within the Active Directory? How they can limit the privilege escalation?
Yeah. Sure. So real quick, privilege escalation is when you obtain higher privileges, or sometimes referred to as lateral privask, where you obtain privileges for something at the same level, but is, adjacent to where you are trying to go, right? So privilege escalation can come in a couple different forms. Typically, when you see privilege escalation, it's, okay, I'm a standard user and I want to elevate my privileges to a domain admin. Or if you read a threat report, it's going to show like, hey, the threat actor was a standard user, and then they used this privask technique or privilege escalation technique to get access to this server and continue on their attack. So the best defense against privilege escalation is least privilege and tier security. One of the biggest flaws or biggest mistakes I see IT admins making is logging into non-domain controllers with domain admin accounts or with privileged accounts, right? So if I'm a domain admin, I don't want to be, troubleshooting issues on Susie's computer, right? Susie's accounting machine, because Susie is a standard user and she's checking her email, she's browsing the web. If malware gets on that machine or a threat actor gets access to that computer, now there are domain admin credentials or potentially tokens that are cached or stored on that computer that I, as a threat actor, might be able to obtain and then use. So that's a very risky practice by IT admins. So that's a big one, is not logging on to, untrusted systems with a privileged account.
Yeah, totally right. And coming right now to the best practices. Now, I want to just secure my domain, according to the norms. What I have to do, I want to just apply all the best practices. I have just to follow some frameworks, maybe, I don't know, some guides, what I have to do?
Yeah, unfortunately, it comes down to, it's not one thing, right? Mm-hmm. It comes down to hardening. It comes down to understanding what types of misconfigurations are going to be targeted by threat actors and attacks. So for people listening who want advice on securing AD, one, I would look at what threat actors are doing. What are the attacks? What are the techniques that they're using? And one of the resources you can use is something called DEFA report. That's a website. It's got free threat reports on it. And those are real investigations of real attacks, real threat actors, the real TTPs, if you will. And if you look at that, you'll see some commonalities between those threat reports, and you'll see common tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, that threat actors use. So one is kind of understanding what the threats are. You're right. That kind of the threat modeling approach. So understanding what the threats are, And then 2 is kind of understanding what you can do to harden Active Directory, to secure Active Directory. A great starting point are the CIS benchmarks. So the CIS benchmarks has hundreds of guidelines and benchmarks for all sorts of things: Windows, Linux. There are server benchmarks. There's stuff for appliances and all sorts of stuff. So that's a good resource to look at. Okay, what is the absolute hardened setting, or what are the settings that I can enable that's going to make things a little bit more secure or tighten things up? So the CIS benchmarks is a good resource. And then a couple others that I think are important to consider is kind of the concept of tiered security, or least privilege, like I was talking about. And tiered security is essentially just breaking out your administration into different tiers or different levels. So regular users would be tier 2, servers and like kind of administrative machines would be tier 1, and tier 0 are, the things you want to ultimately protect at all costs, right? That's your domain controllers, domain admin accounts, and things like that. So those are a few resources, but honestly, that question right there could be entire workshops long. In fact, I'm doing a workshop in October, an in-person workshop in
Cool.
South Carolina, all about hardening Active Directory. And it's a 4-hour workshop, and it should be like 24 hours, right? Like this is a very broad topic.
Right. Exactly. I think, it's so large one. I made a workshop about that in one of the Tunisian universities here. And I just tried to select, some attacks, you can't really, cover all that thing.
Yeah.
And right now, comes really to talk about the group policies. And first of all, students really, sometimes when they are beginner about all this kind of Active Directory stuff, they ask the question, what is the group policy? What is the role that it plays? And how I can say we can create, a hardened policy. Okay. I know it exists a lot of types of policies. Okay. But how we can create a good one?
Yeah. So group policy is a feature capability within Active Directory to essentially manage resources. Like we talked about, Active Directory is a directory service, and it helps administer and manage resources. Well, group policy allows you to define certain settings and configurations that you can deploy to your fleet of machines in your Active Directory environment. So you can configure printers, you can configure files and registry settings and all sorts of stuff, right? So one of the major misconfigurations I see with group policy is just misconfigure permissions on the group policy. So, if you have a group policy that does something, if you inadvertently allow, domain users or standard users to be able to modify that group policy, that could lead to a lot of, dangerous side effects. Similarly, if you are installing software with group policy, which is very common, you want users to, install the company AV product or some other software when they log in, it's common to deploy that software through group policies. What happens sometimes is that program or that file or whatever you want to install is many times located on a file share or a network drive. And I've seen where that file share has misconfigured permissions. What that means is there's a file or a program that's getting run as a result of this group policy, but it has misconfigured permissions. So again, could lead to an attack path where standard users could modify that. So it really comes down to permissions. It comes down to the configurations and the settings of group policy, and auditing it, checking it, and making sure that everything is kind of locked down, again, according to least privilege.
Exactly. And we know right now, an Active Directory contains a lot of accounts, and the things, are so serious when we talk about the privileged accounts. And we know, as much we have in accounts there, as much managing those accounts going to be a little bit difficult. And absolutely here, sometimes we're talking about some basic mistakes. You find sometimes sysadmin, someone just leaves the job, but his account's still there. They forgot to remove it. They forgot to remove permissions and whatever. Right now, the question comes, how I can manage, okay, I'm going to just make it a specific question. Right now, my interest on those privileged accounts, how I can manage and monitor them. What if, for example, some attacks, he just succeeded to enter the Active Directory, and he created, a high privilege account. So how I can monitor that?
Yeah. So when it comes to managing those privilege accounts, there's a couple of things you can do. If it's a service account, you can use something called group managed service accounts, which manages the password for you. If it's an administrative account that you're like logging in with and doing administrative functions with, one is making sure the password is long. A long, strong password is highly required. You can enforce that with something called fine-grained password policies. So that's a policy that you can set on specific users that requires them to have a different password policy than the default domain policy. So you have the default domain policy, and then you can have this other fine-grained password policy that says, oh no, these accounts have to have 30 character passwords. Right? So that's one option, is using Active Directory tools that are built in to kind of manage the passwords. From a monitoring standpoint, obviously suspicious sign-in logs suspicious sign-ins are going to be really important. So having the capabilities to, one, grab those audit logs, those logs, those telemetry, that telemetry to be able to identify when those suspicious logins are happening. And then two is managing the account itself. And you can do that with like privileged access management tools. There are tools like Delinea or Secret Server, CyberArk. There's commercial tools that you can buy, and there's open source ones as well that help you manage those privileged accounts. And some of the cool features are you have to like check out the account. So like you check it out and it's only valid for an hour. And then after an hour, it automatically rotates the password and like locks the account or something like that. And you can set the rules. But those PAM products are really nice, and they have a lot of features, but on the downside, they're very expensive, right? There's a lot of cool stuff, very expensive, but definitely worth finding the balance, for yourself on what features you're looking for and what capabilities you need. But absolutely, strong passwords, looking for suspicious sign-ins are a must.
Totally right. And right now it comes to talk about features, right? Active Directory has a lot of features, and sometimes there is a rule as much you're using those kind of features. A lot of them, as much this is maybe like it's an issue. Right now, how we can just define the concept of the least privilege, and how will it play to harden the Active Directory? What is the concept of the least privilege in first place?
Yeah, least privilege is just enough access to do your job and nothing more. And when I say your job, that could be, it could be a computer, it could be a user, it could be something else, whatever that resource is that you're protecting. Usually we talk about this in the context of a user account. So let's use an example. Susie in accounting, right? She's an accounting rep. She doesn't need access to the IT admin file share, right, with all the utilities on it. Exactly. Likewise, the IT admin doesn't need access to the accounting database. They might need to administer the server that it's on and things like that. Yeah, it's great. But you want to least privilege is the principle of only granting access to what that user needs to do their job and nothing more. And how you can configure that, there's a number of different ways in Active Directory. You can use ACLs or DACLs that are built in, to whatever the resource is. Use group policy, logon restrictions, and then if you want to get super fancy, there's things called authentication policies or silos. So there's a lot of built-in ways in Active Directory you can manage that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you know what, sometimes comes to talk about the people, because some people, they are not accepting sometimes the least privilege legacy concept.
Yep.
They have their computer, they're going to be like, I want to install this thing,
Mm-hmm.
So here come to awareness. We have to explain to them that we have to respect the policy of the company and go on.
You give everybody access to everything, and then you don't have to worry about it, right? There's an ease with it. We see this a lot of times in law firms where the document management system is just wide open. Everybody can access every case file, everything. Because, there's a lot to configure, right? When you get down to it, you're getting very fine-grained from a permission standpoint and access standpoint. So it can be very difficult and very arduous and, a long process to finally tune who has access to what. But the upside is not only security, but compliance. in integrity, right? If Susie in accounting isn't supposed to see the data over in HR, you can definitively say like, no, they don't have permission to it, and you can maintain integrity with that. It as well helps, with compliance and, following those requirements as well.
Totally right. And right now, we've talked, about being compliant. We know like an Active Directory must respect rules. And what about right now? I want to just make an audit on my Active Directory. I want to ensure that my server is just like compliant, respecting all the rules. And we know we have to keep an eye about the versions. We know like the version 2012, it's out of the support. So how I can just like using some tools to get alerts, and audit the Active Directory.
Yeah. If anybody listening to this has seen any of my content before or heard me talk about this before, this is one of my favorite subjects because I think there's a lot of great tools that you can use to audit Active Directory environments or to help find a lot of these misconfigurations. Some of them I've written myself, and some of them I contribute to, and others I just am a fan of. The first kind of biggest shout out for me is Pingcastle. Pingcastle was created by Vincent Letou. He helped contribute to Mimikatz. He's done a lot of awesome stuff in the community and security, but he's created a tool called Pingcastle. There is a free version currently. Side note, they were just bought. His company was just bought by Netrix. So there might be some interesting things happening there, but for now there is a free version. But Pingcastle is great. It's an AD, Active Directory Health Assessment tool. You literally just download it, run a health check, and it spits out all this stuff that you can look at. And there's something like 177 plus rules that it checks for. So it looks for pretty much everything. Almost every misconfiguration you can imagine in Active Directory, Pingcastle can find. So that's my first advice is if you are in an environment or you're just coming in or you've taken over an environment, run Pingcastle, find that stuff. There's tools like Script Sentry that you can use to find misconfigured and dangerous logon scripts. It's a tool I wrote. There's another fabulous tool called Locksmith. It was written by Jake Hildreth. He's at Trimark Security. They do Active Directory security assessments. Locksmith is a tool for finding misconfigured certificate templates and ADCS issues. Another free open source, amazing tool. That I help contribute to. And then the last one that I want to shout out is ADeleg and ADeleginator. Those two are used to find insecure permissions or insecure delegations in Active Directory. Again, both free tools. All of the stuff you can download, run for free. They're very safe. I can attest to them being safe and secure to use in your environment. So awesome tools.
Awesome. That's totally fabulous. And that's cool because they're free, absolutely. There's like another one, they're paid, but it's a really good point to start with those ones. And coming right now, to really like a question. So I consider it so important. Right now, what about that? My Active Directory just got attacked. Okay. And here I can see like it was a critical attack. It depends on the attack because, it exists like this kind of attacks. They're really not made that impact, but some of them, they are really catastrophic on the company. Right now, how a company can really recover from an attack, like that happened on their Active Directory? Are they asked to accept it? They're going to report it? What the fixes they can adjust to?
Yeah, this is tough, honestly, because it depends. It depends on what level of compromise there was, and unfortunately, that can be kind of hard to determine, at what level the threat actor was able to compromise or infiltrate the environment. At the worst case, you're looking at a complete forest rebuild, right? Like you burn everything down and you start fresh. So if it's really bad, you might be just starting greenfield, just brand new. So that is a very real possibility. And outside of that, let's say, it was just a user account that was compromised, or you think you've isolated to attack and you can recover with the same environment. You obviously need to take in mind or consider the blast radius or, the impact of wherever that access has granted them. So looking at, if a user was compromised or if an admin account was compromised, you have to look at everything that user had access to. Maybe there's data, maybe there's backups, sensitive data. You have to consider what was kind of potentially compromised, right? And in regulated environments, you might have to report that to authorities or to regulators, especially with like PCI, or if you're in financial services. There are certain regulatory requirements that say, hey, if you have a breach or a compromise, you have to report this. So there is regulatory reporting requirements. You might potentially want to get authorities involved. So there's a lot to consider there. A couple more tactical pieces of advice are things like renewing or revoking and renewing certificates, rotating passwords on accounts, especially like the KRB TGT account, rotating that. The best thing you want to do, though, and kind of like my last piece of advice on this, is making sure you partner with somebody who you trust that can kind of help walk you through that process. As much as you can, don't go that alone. Find a firm, a defer firm, or find an outfit that can help you and somebody you trust to kind of help you walk through that recovery. They will help you. They kind of will empathize with you. They'll been in your shoes before. They'll know what to do. Because many times when this happens, like your hair's on fire, like you don't know what to do. You don't know what ends up, like you're freaking out. So it's helpful to have somebody come in that's kind of cool, calm, and collected, kind of help walk you through it, figure out what you need to do, and help you move forward.
Mm-hmm. Totally right. And here, as we are talking about the attacks, we know like it is a lot of attacks that can happen on Active Directory, and one of those critical ones, for example, the Kerberoasting, and for example, like the pasta ticket. Here, people sometimes think only the attacks happen, internally. If I want to just attack an Active Directory, we have to be like internal on the network. But sometimes we have to know that, for example, one of your colleagues, his computer is already compromised, and someone who is doing his stuff. Now the attacker, he's on the network. So can we just explain one of these attacks, like Kerberoasting, how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So Kerberoasting is can be kind of complex as you get into it. I'll try to explain it kind of at a high level. Kerberoasting is, Kerberos is an authentication protocol on Active Directory, and Kerberoasting is an attack that could potentially lead to obtaining a password hash or a credential or a plain text password for an account. And essentially, Kerberoasting is when you request a service ticket for a service. That service ticket is encrypted with the hash of that service account's password. That password, then you can take offline and you can do something called cracking. So you can take that hash, you can try and crack it. Cracking it will potentially revert it to its plain text password. So if there is a service account that's Kerberoastable, or an admin account, or any account, and they're using a weak password, it's very likely that password, that plain text password, is going to be recovered. Fortunately, as of lately, I haven't had a lot of success with Kerberoasting. Organizations are doing a pretty good job making sure those accounts have strong passwords. But it's usually very common to find Kerberoastable accounts with weak passwords, and many times those are admin accounts. So Kerberos and Kerberoasting has to do with tickets and allows intricate things with that. So that's kind of the basics of Kerberoasting, is requesting a service ticket, it's called, crack the hash, and get the password.
Yeah, and like just imagine if someone got access on a service account who has an access on the database,
Yep.
This is getting so bad.
And that's just how Kerberos works, by the way, for anybody that's not familiar. That's how Kerberos and the whole process works. So when you try and get access to a service, that's just way Active Directory works. It's not a misconfiguration in any way. But the mitigation for it is strong, long passwords.
Exactly. And here's the best part, that you can crack, the hash offline, so you can take your time to guess the password. Dear Spencer, I want to really thank you for your expensive time. It was just like an amazing conversation with you. And before we're going to end our episode, it's like, a classical question to ask. And for each episode, I ask this, to pass the message for the people who has the passion for the cybersecurity. do you want to just really pass any message for those kind of students, even professionals who wanted to convert to cybersecurity, how they just can start their path into cybersecurity and make the success in it?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so cybersecurity is very diverse. It has come a long ways in the last 10, 20 years, even as long as I've been doing it, which is not as long as many of the other folks that are in the industry who, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So as well as many others, everybody in the industry, we live and thrive off of the works of other people and the research that they've done and things like that. And we're very grateful for that. But cybersecurity is very diverse, right? There's a lot of different, things that you could do in cybersecurity. You could be a pen tester. You could, do audits and compliance. You could be a SOC analyst. You could be a threat hunter, a threat intel analyst, malware reverse engineering. There's a lot. So my best advice for somebody getting into the industry, somebody who wants to or thinks they do, is try as many different things as you can. Try hack the box, try and, look at GRC and, try to do some malware reverse engineering or, try different things, watch YouTube videos, do hack the box or try hack me. So try things and figure out what it is you exactly like. Cause you might not like any of it, and that's fine. That's the part of learning, and that's why you do things and, go to school and all that. So try as many different things as possible. And then once you've kind of discovered that thing, you're like, oh, I really love this. Put in the work, research, put in time and effort and devote a lot of energy to diving into that topic and kind of absorbing yourself in it or immersing yourself in it. Research things that will allow you to ask, smarter, better questions. So rather than just, oh, I don't know that, I'm just going to go ask someone, do some research, try and figure it out, try and learn a little bit, and then try and come up with like a better question. And many times for me, I'll be thinking about something, and right before I hit click on like asking somebody a question, I'm like, well, there's something else that I could look into just to check, right? There's always something more you can kind of dig into and look at. And like I said, that'll allow you to ask better questions, which will get you better answers. The other thing is just finding like-minded people. So Twitter is great for this, or Discord communities. Find like-minded people and, contribute to the conversation. Even if you don't feel like you have nothing to add, believe me, you'll have some input, you'll have some, thoughts on whatever. So find like-minded people, contribute to that group. And the last thing is just teaching. So, when you're just starting out, you don't feel like, oh, who am I to be like teaching this? But it doesn't have to be anything crazy or formal. Like you don't have to call yourself an expert. But teaching something is a great way to solidify your learning of it. That's been tried and true for millennia or whatever, right? Teaching is a great way to learn things and solidify your understanding. So learn stuff, teach it to a friend or teach it to a colleague or something like that, or just talk about it on the internet with a blog post or a video. That is a great way to help kind of, solidify your understanding of topics.
And guys, I want to just mention that Spencer is doing an amazing content. Later, I'm going to leave all the links related to his videos. He's explaining the things in a fabulous way. Dear Spencer, thank you so much for the amazing time. It was a fabulous episode. And literally, all the people just following me and my audience, I'm sure that they're going to enjoy it. Thank you so much for all the insights that you shared.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me ramble on and on and go on and about this stuff. I love this topic. It's a great topic. I think there's still tons to learn for everybody involved in this world of Active Directory and security. But thank you. I appreciate you having me come on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and hopefully everybody listened and enjoyed and got a little fun out of it.